Assalamu alaikum everybody, welcome to my channel. This is Niqabi Faz, and today I want to take you with me on a journey, and this journey is a little bit of a trip down memory lane as I explain, I guess, why I decided to firstly wear the hijab and then secondly and ultimately decided to wear the niqab. So I'm going to take you through that journey and kind of what happened in my life that kind of caused me to make the decisions that I did. And then I'm going to the second part of this video, I'm going to focus on the actual reasons why. And there are about 5 or 6 reasons why I ultimately decided that I want to wear niqab. So let's start at the beginning. I have been fortunate, obviously, to grow up in a Muslim community, or a community that has a lot of Muslims in, raised in a Muslim family. And so wearing the hijab was never something that was alien to us. My mother wore it. Other women in our family wore it. So it was completely normal, and there was nothing like strange about deciding to wear the hijab. But I only really made the decision consciously to wear hijab when I was not in my community and I was not in my country. So I had moved abroad for about a year and a half, and I was living abroad. And while I was living abroad, I at the time wasn't wearing hijab. And the country that I was living in was a country largely where people actually didn't believe in anything. They were like, yeah, a large portion of the country were people that just didn't believe in God. And I was working as a teacher, and one of the things kids would always ask me, they'd ask me about my ethnicity, where I'm from, my culture, as well as my religion. And so in answering those questions, it raised a lot of questions for me, specifically in terms of why I believe what I believe. And the reality is a lot of people hardly ever question the faith that they're raised in. So I was raised as a Muslim, and I never consciously even thought about, um, you know, what Islam really meant to me. I just understood it implicitly as the faith that I grew up in, and therefore was my faith. And so in Korea, I had a bit of like this internal challenge that I was facing, because now suddenly I was in a society where people, it was very normal not to believe in the existence of a God. And suddenly I felt that I needed to understand my religion just a little bit more. So also I could contextualize my place in this particular society. So I did a lot of research, and I listened to a lot of lectures, and I spoke to a lot of people and scholars. And I guess ultimately what I wanted is I just wanted to be closer to our Creator. And that was not an easy journey for me. It was a journey that like it took a while. And I think the end part of that process, two things really happened. The first one, and I always say this when I talk about my hijab story, the first aspect of my hijab story is actually a lot broader than my hijab story. And that's basically that it was at that particular age that I decided to be Muslim. Like I made that conscious decision. And this, for a lot of people that were born into Muslim families, is a very strange concept, because people are like, yeah, well, you chose to be Muslim from the beginning. And the reality is like, I didn't really make a choice about my faith. It was the faith that I was raised in. But at this particular point in time, I reached a point where I felt I knew sufficiently enough to make that choice for myself. And I made it. Like, yeah, and from that point onwards, I think my life changed in a big way. And yeah, so then Ramadan came up in that year, and I spoke to the teachers at the school and the management, and agreed that I could wear the hijab during Ramadan. And so I did. And then after Ramadan, I just kept it on. I kept wearing it. I didn't take it off. And that was the beginning of my hijab story. Now, obviously in the beginning, and this happens with a lot of people, in the beginning, you try and fit the headscarf into your current like style. And my style at that point in time was very like corporate chic, or professional chic in the way. So I was very much into like suits and shirts and those type of things. And so I was trying to fit wearing the hijab into that context, right? Which a lot of us do, especially in the beginning. So fast forward, this happened in about, let's, as I say, 2011, 2012. That's when I had this like epiphany. And over the years, I progressively started to dress more modestly. So very slowly, I went from suit pants to dresses, and then from dresses ultimately to abayas. And so that was the hijab story. The niqab story, I think, is a little bit more complex, and it actually starts and has its root in my hijab story. So when I decided to wear the hijab, I actually thought about wearing the niqab, but I was just so afraid. I was in a foreign country, and I just thought, how am I going to do this in a foreign country? This, like, it actually overwhelmed me, just the thought pattern. And I just felt like I couldn't make that decision at that point in time. But the seed was planted. And at that point in time, I had decided that eventually, at some point in my life, I did want to wear niqab. So when the opportunity arose, so I think before I speak about just when the opportunity arose, I want to just talk about sort of the work that I do. So I have worked both in the corporate, government, and NGO sector. And so working in that sector, specifically in communications and brand and all of that, you're very much at the forefront of the public image of these organizations. And so most of those jobs that I had or I landed with wearing the hijab. So it was never really like an issue. But I was so conscious about the fact that what would be what would it mean to be, for example, a communications manager of like a really big brand, for me walking around like in niqab. Like I didn't know what that mean. I didn't know if people would accept it. I was very, very, like, before I decided to make the decision, I was very self-conscious about the idea, and I didn't know how that would work, just in my environment. So anyway, fast forward to about 3 years ago, when like after I got married, or before I got married, I thought about it, right? And then at some point, when I got married, I just felt like the environment, like I had the safety to be able to make that decision. Like I didn't need to worry about all the things I worried about before, about, how difficult this is going to be, and about my work and all of these things. I just felt like a safe environment was created, and that in that environment, obviously within the context of marriage, I was now able to just be my true self. And being my true self at that point in time, I felt was wearing niqab. So that's my story and my journey. I want to also talk about why I made the decision. So that was my hijab niqab story, and I want to now talk about maybe the 5 or 6 reasons why I made the decision to ultimately wear niqab. The first reason, and I think this is probably the reason that most women would give, is that ultimately I wanted to be closer to my creator. And drawing closer to my creator, I think for every Muslim, and specifically every Muslim, it is a goal and an objective of ours. And I just felt that this was a mechanism and a means to do that, to draw closer to him in, being in complete submission. And that obviously doesn't mean that we're perfect human beings. Like I say this to people all the time. I'm a flawed human being just like everybody else. And I'm striving and I'm trying, and that's ultimately for me what the niqab represents, just in terms of my journey towards my creator. So anyway, that was the first reason. The second reason I think is very much tied to the first reason, which is about increasing my piety. I think in drawing closer to your creator, ultimately what you also want to do is you want to just increase your piety, increase your iman, increase you sort of that connection that you have with your creator. And so that was another reason why I chose to wear the niqab. The third reason perhaps is a bit more radical and a bit more external. I think the first two reasons were internal reasons in terms of connection and my creator. The third reason is more about the society out there. The reality is that women's bodies are commodified. They're objectified. If you look at series, you look at TV programs, you look at movies, you look at adverts, you look at any sort of marketing that is out there, the woman's body is sexualized and objectified and commodified. And for me, I just felt like I wanted to check out from that system, because for me, checking out from that system meant that I had the freedom to choose how and when I show my body and to who I show my body. And that obviously includes my face and whatever that entails. So a large part of I think society's way it views women is also a reason for my rejection of that. And so me stepping away from that and saying, you know what, I don't want to be part of this culture that where women really don't have a choice in the commodification and objectification of women. Now, that doesn't mean, for example, even with a niqab, that you're not being objectified. It simply means that I want to be able to have a choice to who I show what. And some of my friends would say that is a really radical way of looking at things. And perhaps it is a bit radical. But at the end of the day, we have to look at what is in the best interest of ourselves. And we have to make decisions for ourselves. And that's ultimately the basis of freedom. And the basis of freedom for me is that I completely choose not to be part of a system that takes a woman and really just objectifies her. Now, I'm not bashing women that reveal their bodies or anything of the sort. I'm more criticizing the system that enables and makes that possible, and also creates or adds or believes that value is somehow attached to sexualization. And so I just feel like I reject that in its entirety. And so I prefer to cover up and really keep and I think this ties into the fourth reason, and that's really that for me there's an I'm a hopeless romantic. Like I'm a romantic, and I'm into poetry and all of that, and for me there's an element of beauty to say, you know what I have under the burqa and under the niqab and under my jilbab has absolutely nothing to do with anybody except between myself and my husband. And for me there's an element of romanticism in that I I gift this to you and to only you. And some people might have particular views on that, but as I say, I'm a romantic, and so I'm all about bold gestures when it comes to love. And for me, that is a form of a bold gesture. I think the last two components, just in terms of my hijab niqab story, is probably tied together. And the one aspect is that when you wear this and you walk out into society, and because I work in a non-Muslim setting, in like or I have worked in the corporate government and all of those sectors, when you walk out into society in a non-Muslim country and you don this, the reality is that you are a representation of your religion. You the walking, talking image that a lot of people have of Islam. And so in that way, you have to also be very careful about how you act wearing the niqab. And because that's the perception people then have of Islam. And so this is maybe, I don't know if this is perhaps a reason why, but it's certainly something that is in your psychology as a person. And the reality is that this thing actually serves as a form of protection, like a shield. That's how I feel about it. It serves as a shield for me from wrongdoing. Shaitan is always there, as I say, Shaitan is always there to try and mislead us and take us in an array of different directions. And we're human, we're fallible, we fail, and all of that. But I feel like this niqab serves as a shield for myself against really major sins. And because you're also a walking, talking representation, especially those sins as they relate to your public life. And so that is, I think, also a reason in terms of why to sustain it for me. So yeah, I think that was like 5 or 6. I didn't really count, but those were 5 or 6 reasons why I chose to wear the niqab. As I said at the beginning, every person's story is different. Every person's story is their story. At the end of the day, I think if there's one thing that almost all niqabis have in common, is that we're doing this because we want to draw closer to our Creator, and we want to be able to increase in our piety. And the niqab represents an element of modesty, and so it does change you as a person. It does make you evolve as a person. I have always been a very passionate individual. I've always spoken with a great deal of passion, and when I worked in communications, that was like my great selling point. And so wearing the niqab has forced me also to think about how I engage with people of different genders, and how I use my voice, and whether that voice is done in a way that doesn't really speak to the modesty that I want to put forward, and certainly the modesty that this garment represents. So yeah, like it's as I say, it's a personal journey for everybody, and it takes people different like time frames to get to where they were. For me, I thought about it like really hard for 2 months before I actually made the decision. And when I made the decision, I was like, I already made it, and I woke up in the morning and I remember this day so clearly, and I told my husband, this is what I want to do. And I think he was a bit shocked because it just came out of nowhere. But for me, I took time, I consulted with my Creator, I reflected upon why I wanted to do this. I reflected upon the initial thought that I had way back when I decided to wear the hijab, about why I believed the niqab journey was going to be part of my journey. So yeah, so that's my story. I love listening to other people's stories. I have been binge watching other people's sort of niqab and hijab stories, and they always serve as such a great form of inspiration. And as I say, if there's one thing that I realize that most niqabis have in common, is that ultimately we're doing this to please our Creator. That there are reasons outside of ourselves that that are good reasons, but the main and ultimate purpose is to submit and serve our Creator. So yeah, that's an exciting aspect for me, just in terms of me learning and binge watching and just feeling akin to my fellow sisters. So thank you so much for joining me on my journey down memory lane. Please remember, if you like the content that I'm creating or sharing, to like and subscribe, and to share this with your families. Shukran jazilan for joining me. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.